In this video, we're going to go over how to affect the visibility of certain GUI objects by other GUI objects. So the two things I'm going to work on in this video, if you look at the example script I have here, is how to change the color of this color index slider via the selection of the orientation option menu here. So as you can see, it changes the color depending on what orientation I use. The other one I'm going to use is how to change the visibility of the icon options and turning on and off the pull vector options based on what rig type I'm selecting here using these radio buttons. Now, we have the existing script from the previous video, but all this is right now is just visual. It's not running anything, it's not changing anything because we haven't hooked up any commands to them yet. And that's what we're going to do in this video. So if we go into the script here, the first thing I'm going to do is what I just erased, is I'm going to create a command from the option menu to run whenever I select something. So that command that I want to use, or that flag, is the change command flag. Or I can just type it out like that. Change command, or for short, I can just use CC. So what I want to run here is a command. A basic Python scripting would have you run the function like this, and this is all it would take, and this would run whatever the name of the function is that I put in here. Now, in the beginning of the previous video, I alluded to using this, which is essentially creating a variable for the namespace that I'm working in. Now, this isn't going to be super important in this video. It will in the next video, but I'm going to include it in here, and I'm going to explain just briefly what it's doing. So what as I stated in the previous video, this is essentially getting me the namespace of the code that I'm working in. So if I were to have this code inside the script editor, the namespace would be different. It would just be called main. But if I'm working within a separate Python file, the namespace would be the name of the Python file. So in this case, new arm rig here. Now, the reason why that's important is this will allow us to pass arguments from GUI commands to the functions a lot easier than it would normally. Now, for these two commands that I'm working here, they're not going to need any arguments, but I'm going to include them just to showcase how this will set up initially. So I'm going to include script name plus, and then I'm going to put the command's name in quotations. I'm going to give the command an open and close parentheses, and I'm going to put a dot here. And that's all it takes to use this script name. And the reason why I want to do this is because originally, when I just had the name of the function here, it wouldn't allow me to include any parentheses. So it wouldn't allow me to pass any arguments inside these parentheses. But now that I'm using the script name, I can use open and close parentheses here, and I can plug in to this parentheses here any argument that I want to pass through. Now again, these two functions that I'm going to run don't require any arguments. So, I mean, they could if I wanted to, but I'm going to showcase that more so in the next video. So, now that I have the function name, I'm going to copy that name of the function or name of the command at least, and then I'm going to create a function based off that name. Now the basic scripting also showed you that I had to put a star args in the parentheses here when I create any function, besides the GUI at least. But with using the script name function, I don't have to apply the star args here. I can just leave this as it is. So that's another advantage of using the script name. I don't have to plug in star args for every single function. So now that I have the function name, we're going to fill this with what we need to connect it to the color index slider. So the first thing I'm going to do is query the value of the selection in the option menu. So I'm going to just give this a variable. So I'm going to call it ori_opt just for orientation option. And this equals option menu here. And I'm going to get the specific name of the orientation menu here. This is why I give unique names to all my GUI objects here. So we're going to plug in Ori menu. We're going to query it. So Q stands for query. So that means I'm going to try and access information from this option menu. And what I want to access is the selection. So SL equals true. So now this is going to query what selection I have here. Whether, since there's three options here, it's what it's going to return when I query it is what number I've selected out of these. So if I select left, it's going to return a value of 1. If I select right, 2, and center, 3. So it's going to return either 1, 2, or 3. And so now I need to apply those values into creating the color. So the easiest way to take this value and change the visibility of something is, for me, the easiest is using an if statement. So I'm going to type if this orientation option variable here is equal to 1. It's important to use the double equal sign when using an if statement. So if it is equal to 1, I want to change the value of the color. So what I'm going to do is create a variable here. So I'm going to call this orientation color. And I'm going to say, so for option 1, it would be left. So I need to know the number of, in the color index slider, of blue. But I know for a fact that that number is 7. So I already know the numbers here, so I'm just going to keep going here. So now that I have the if statement for the first option here, I'm going to run the same for option 2. And option 2 is right, so I know that will be red. And I know for a fact that that value in the color index slider is 14. So now we have blue, we have red, and lastly we need yellow. So I'm going to set if orientation option equals 3. The orientation color is yellow, which is 18. So now I've created a simple if statement, and depending on what I select, this variable is going to equal a specific number here. So now I just need to take that number and apply it to the color index slider. So the easiest way to do that is I'm going to take this color index slider right here, and what I'm going to ignore all this other stuff because it doesn't, all I'm trying to do is edit it. I don't need any of this information here. So I'm just going to paste this here. So we're using the arm color, which is the specific name for that color index slider. I'm going to edit the color index slider, so we do E equals true for edit. And then I want to change the value. So I can type in value, or I'll just type in V. So V equals this variable, because this variable equals the number that I want. And that is it. So if I save this and I open my new script here, we should see now this option menu here is changing the color of the color index slider based on the orientation here. So that's the first function that we run. The second one's going to be a little bit more complicated, but it's going to be pretty similar to the first one. We're going to change the visibility of the icon options here and the pole vector based on the selection in the radio button. So, first thing we need to do, as we did previously, is we need to create a command for this radio button right here, because this is the radio button that changes the rig type. So just like we did in the option menu, we're going to do the change command flag here. We're going to include the script name here, plus, and we're going to do, in this case, I'm just going to call this arm type this, open and close parentheses. All right, so now we have our function name here. So all we need to do is create our function now. Again, these aren't passing arguments, so I don't need to apply any arguments, and I don't need to put in these star args in the parentheses here because we're using that namespace up here. So now that I have that, now we need to query the value of the radio button. So just like we did for the previous function, we need to query the selection of this radio button. So we're going to query equals true and selection equals true, because both the option menu and the radio button rely on selection to work. So I'm just going to give this a variable of arm type, and there we go. And that's all we're going to need for right now. So similar to what I did right here, we're just going to create a simple if statement here to run off the selection here. So I'm just going to say if arm type is equal to 1. Now, at this point, what am I trying to turn on and off? Or what am I trying to change here? Well, I'm trying to change the visibility of these option menus here, as well as the radio button down here. So, but I don't want to necessarily put the edit for each one of these option menus and all the text and stuff that's in here. I don't want to put that underneath the if statement just because it's going to clog everything up. And the less lines of code I have to use, the better. So what I'm going to do is similar to right here. I'm going to create variables, and I'm going to apply those variables to the visibility of these GUI objects. So we have really three different types of rig options here. So we have IK, FK, and IKFK. So I'm going to create a variable for each of these, and it's going to turn off the icons correspondingly, because when I'm in IK, all I need is the IK icon style, the PV icon style, and this radio button group down here. When I'm in FK, all I need is the FK icon style. I don't need any of the other stuff in here, and I don't need the pull vector option down here. But when I'm in IKFK, I need all of this. So basically, it runs into three different types of options here: IK, FK, and IKFK. So I'm going to call this IK val, and since arm type equals 1, essentially saying if the selection here is this first one here. So if it's set to IK, I obviously want the IK value to be 1. And since visibility works on 0 to 1, all I need to put in is 1 or 0. So IK is obviously set to 1 in an IK. So the next one would be FK val. And since we're in IK, the FK I can set to 0. And the next one would be IKFK val. And since we're only using IK, we don't need the hand icon here to create any sort of IKFK switch, since we're just in IK. So I can set the IKFK val to 0 as well. And so at this point, we're just going to duplicate it and change things depending on what selection option we have here. So if arm type equals 2, meaning we're setting the rig type to FK, I don't want IK visible, I do want FK visible, but I don't need IKFK visible. So that's it for option 2. So we're just going to paste this again for option 3. And since IKFK requires everything, I'm going to turn everything to 1 here. So now that I have the if statement and I have the variables set to specific 0 to 1 values, now I can apply these values to the visibility of the GUI objects here. So what I'm going to do is, first one I want to change the visibility of, I'm going to include everything within here. So I'm going to include the text and the option menu for all 4 of these and this radio button, including the texts here. So the first one is the IK style text, which is, this is the text that is creating this here. So I'm going to bring in the text and the option menu here. I'm just going to paste this in here. And what I'm going to do is say edit equals true, because I'm editing it when I change visibility. And viz, which is short for visibility, I'm going to set, now what I want to set it to, since these are the IK options here, I want to use this IK val variable. So I'll just set viz equal to this variable, because this variable is 0 to 1, so it should work for visibility. I'm going to copy and paste the same thing down here. And so that should turn on and off this text and this option menu here. So we're just going to start to plug and play everything else here. So we've got the FK here. And I'm going to take out the label flag because I don't need that here. And I just need to, since these are the FK, this is the text for the FK and the option menu for the FK for right here, I'm going to change the visibility from IK value to FK value. Okay, so at this point, I'm just going to get the pull vector, or in this case, since the hand icon style is next, I'm just going to get the stuff for the hand. I'm going to paste that in here. So this is the text for the hand icon and the option menu there. And you see I've had it equals true, but the viz, actually I changed it for this one. So the viz equals the IKFK value variable here. Because the hand icon I would only need in IKFK. I don't need it in IK or FK because the only reason I need it here is to create essentially a variable to control the IKFK switch. So that's the only reason I would need that here. So I just need to use the IKFK value for that. And so next what I need is the pull vector stuff. So the pull vector text and the pull vector option menu here. And as you can see, it's set to IK value because that should only be visible in either IK or IKFK. So IK value here. And lastly, I want to include the text and the radio button for right here. So that would be these two things here. So let's bring in that text first. Oops, tabbed it over there. And edit equals true, viz equals IK val. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the radio button here. Edit equals true, viz equals IK val. And that should be it for now. That should do everything I need it to do. So if I save this and then rerun the script, oops, where did we get an error? Line 123, huh? Oops, forgot the end parentheses there. That's on me. But now that I run this, there we go. So now that we have the radio buttons hooked up, now you can see they turn on and off based on selection there. Yeah, it kind of doubled up the separator there. So what I can do actually is get the code for that extra separator, this one here, and just plug that in to the visibility as well. And so this is also why it's very handy to have unique naming for all your GUI objects here, so you can specifically access them when you want to change visibility on them or edit some part of the GUI object. So with that all done, now if I set it to FK, I only see one separator here. So it's looking good. And again, the orientation is changing the color here. So now we've hooked up our GUI here to change other parts of it and kind of give it a dynamic look to it, with that will work for creating auto rigging on the fly here. So this looks good. So on the next video, we're going to go over how to create preset controls here, because right now this button does nothing, and I want to create preset icons to get the overall scale that I want for my controls and apply that once I actually finalize the arm. So that's what we'll work on in the next video.